Hello, you're watching Initiative Africa. My name is Asha Sampath. Welcome to your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work. This week we focus on education with a promising new digital platform. And with our guest, we explore the question related to the future of journalism in Africa. Well, it's time for Initiative Africa. Let's get on with the show with our top stories today. The protection of journalists in Africa is his mission. At Reporter Without Borders, Sadibou Marong monitors the evolution of a profession that is undergoing radical change. His vocation is to track down abuses against the media and their representatives on the continent. He is our guest today.
We often see journalists are stuck between the hammer of armed terrorist groups and the anvil of the defence and security forces. These are difficult situations. But in this context, we advocate that information must remain pluralist.
All your lessons and notes at your fingertips. This is the revolution proposed by the educational platform Magowe, which is expanding rapidly in Guinea and the sub-region. Every morning I check the attendance on my phone, not with a paper register. It also helps me bring up the students' grades at the end of each month after I finished evaluating the pupils. How a district well known to Africans in Paris has denied its sulphurous reputation. Architectural revival, enthusiasm for designers, a place of social ties. Château-Rouge is waking up.
People have to come. They should come to discover what we're trying to showcase here so that it changes their perception of the neighborhood.
In Guinea, there's now an app to track learners' progress at school as well as at home. Magowe, the digital platform created in 2019 by a young computer scientist from the country for students to revise and monitor their schooling, is now in full swing. 15,000 users and 100 schools use it in Guinea and even in the sub-region. Our correspondent from Conakry, Sanyon Koma, has the story. It's a real revolution in this primary school located in the upper suburbs of Conakry. For 3 years now, Noelle Lama, a teacher in this school, has been using her mobile phone as a working tool. The smartphone is not only used to make phone calls, but is now part of her teaching equipment. Every morning I check the attendance on my phone, not with a paper register. It also helps me bring up the students' grades at the end of each month after I finished evaluating the pupils. This digital platform, which today improves the Guinean education system, is the work of this computer scientist, Mazougou Diopogui, a graduate of the University of Guinea. The scientist has just developed this digital portal called Magowe Technology, a 100% educational platform which was financed entirely by himself, allowing students to access training programs from their mobile phones even without an internet connection. Here, in this school, he came to inquire about the quality of service of his platform.
As soon as you log in, the system can automatically alert the parents about their child being in class or not. And after that, at the end of the year, for each child, we will know how many classes he or she has attended and how many classes he or she has also missed. Even their parents will have access to this information.
The digital platform, a first in the country, was designed to improve the Guinean educational system, which is already in decline due to the absence of an education policy. With only 9% of students taking the baccalaureate in 2022, Guinea recorded one of the most catastrophic results in its history. Magowe Technology is trying to fix this problem. The portal has a space where students can revise and interact with their teachers.
He Here, you can consult the content of the courses, so you can revise wherever you are, even without a connection. You can ask your teacher if there are sections where you need help to understand. The small envelope allows you to ask a question to the teacher, and when you ask a question, all your friends in the same class can also receive the question. When the teacher answers, everyone else can also have access to that answer. So really, a real exchange platform between you, your teachers, and yourself.
An exchange platform, but also a tool for managing school revenues in a country ranked 147th out of 180 countries in the Transparency International Index of Corruption Perception in the Public Sector in 2022. This is another problem that the programmer is trying to solve. For example, Emmanuel uses the digital platform in his school for his daily financial transactions. The transactions are monitored in real time by the parents and school officials.
What is important here, when a parent pays the school fee for his child, even if he's not there, he can see the different payments made online. That's why parents are told to download the online application, which is Our School, as soon as they register. Whenever you make a financial transaction, you can access all your payments. And it's a success, a great success.
A revolutionary idea that now interests several Guinean schools. Now, with a community of already more than 15,000 members, its founder dreams of seeing all Guinean schools using his platform. Here, in this establishment, Mazugu came to present his technology that attracts an average audience of over 20,000 visitors per day.
Bonjour, monsieur. Bonjour, mesdames.
Good morning, gentlemen, and good morning, ladies. It is currently illusory to think that we can ban children from the telephone. Of course, it can be banned at school, but can we ban it at home? I think not. And we thought, instead of trying to ban telephone from children, we should instead find a way of transforming these telephones into an educational tool. That way, the parent, from his phone, I know you won't like this, will know whether his child has lessons today, whether he went to school, what time he returned to class, what time he went out, and when you do an assessment, the parent doesn't need to ask you how it went. From his phone, he can see the grade you scored. This is the solution we have developed. Thank you.
Merci.
Around 100 schools across the country are using the solution. Countries such as Côte d'Ivoire, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Senegal and Mali are experimenting with it in their education systems. With an estimated annual turnover of over $22,000 annually, Magoe Technology intends to conquer French-speaking Africa by 2030. Its founder also has ambitions to design his smartphone brand to be accessible to all educational functions without an internet connection. As I mentioned before, Sadibou Marong is a defender of the media and journalists. The Dakar-based Africa director of Reporters Without Borders was instrumental in organizing the campaign to support imprisoned Senegalese journalist Pape Alé Niang. More recently, the murder of Cameroonian journalist Martinez Zogo led him to call for a rigorous and independent investigation, as he told Lance Stras and our Senegalese contributor Sheikh C. Take a look. Sadibou Marong, hello and welcome to Initiative Africa. We meet during a tough period for our profession, the murder a few weeks ago of Cameroonian journalist Martinez Zogo. He was the director of Radio Amplitude in Yaoundé and presenter of the program Embouteillage, and was covering corruption cases. What are your views about the assassination of this brave journalist?
D'abord, il faut d'abord souligner avec énergie que c'est un triste.
First, I can't emphasize enough what a very tragic event this is. It is extremely sad what happened to the Cameroonian journalist Martinez Zogo, who was just doing his job. While working his story, he was kidnapped by unknown people who finally murdered him. After 5 days, he endured physical abuse in the worst imaginable way. It's a situation that highlights the danger faced by journalists in Cameroon today, and especially journalists who have the courage to tackle sensitive subjects such as embezzlement, misappropriation and governance-related issues in general.
L'histoire de détournement, les questions de détournement, de gouvernance d'une manière générale. Mais
what has emerged in the aftermath of this assassination is that at least 30 people have so far been arrested as part of the investigation conducted by Cameroonian authorities. We believe this investigation must be very impartial and independent. It must also be very rigorous to identify those responsible, the persons or person responsible, by bringing them or him to justice and punishing them.
In fact, freedom of the press is an everlasting battle in many countries. Do you think it's particularly compromised in Africa?
There are in fact several aspects to this in Africa, but we have noticed that here and there the tendency is to bypass such freedoms. Such as setting up new legislation similar to and linked to digital technology that include some harsh measures to allow the arrest of journalists. Now, if you look at East Africa, there are problems. For example, today in Ethiopia with the Tigray war, it was really hard. There are also legal issues in countries like Uganda or Zimbabwe, where media laws are getting tougher and tougher. And in Nigeria as well, there is a problem, with, on average, one attack on a journalist at least every 3 days, which is extremely worrying.
Can pressure from civil society, journalists, unions and press defense organizations like yours, Reporters Without Borders, be effective? I'm thinking, for example, of the case of the Senegalese journalist working for Dakar Matin, Pape Alé Niang, who was released last January.
To prevent such situations from recurring, we need to work with a clear strategy, taking into account the reality of the country. But in the case of the Senegalese journalist Pape Alé Niang, the primary difficulty was that as an NGO supporting the freedom of the press, we found the Senegalese authorities quite inflexible. We had the impression that they had a fixed point of view, and whatever we said wouldn't change their minds. Now, what is important is, at least in the case of journalist Pape Alé Niang, there has been a specific mobilization, notably by press associations in Senegal. And it is also possible to directly attack authorities from a legal standpoint, because there are arbitrary arrests that are proven and even documented to have broken the law. This falls under the header of arbitrary arrests, and if they are closed in flexible countries, they must be prosecuted, either at a regional or international level, and we must continue to advocate until justice has been done.
Obtenir satisfaction.
Welcome to the second part of our show. The Château-Rouge, La Goutte d'Or neighbourhood, located east of the Butte Montmartre in Paris, is well known to Africans. For a long time, it was a place of insalubrity and drug trafficking. But in recent years, thanks in particular to the renovation policy carried out by the municipality of the 18th district of the capital, it has taken on a new face, to the delight of the inhabitants of the district, as well as designers attracted by its new energy, and of course the visitors. A report by Nicolas Marong. In his shop, Rue des Gardes, Boubacarry Sidibé is busy preparing a tailor-made evening dress. This Ivorian fashion designer is part of the Made in Godot cooperative, which brings together various artisans from the neighbourhood. He notably shares his studio with Sheikh Omar and Mathieu Corey. For him, the diversity of creators is a real asset.
The potential here is really, people have to come. They should come to discover what we're trying to showcase here so that it changes their perception of the neighborhood. So we really want to take up the challenge. Paris is the capital of fashion, hence we'd like to add one more straw to the haystack.
Created in 2011, the Made in Godot cooperative has set itself the objective of promoting the economic development of artisans and merchants in the district. Fado started working as a tailor in 2005. With Annie, a former shopkeeper, they remember the state of the neighborhood at that time. It was horrible, Rue Mira, we can't say otherwise. Yeah, it's true, there was drug trafficking, it was dirty, it was old, obsolete. That was the problem.
Yeah, with really completely damaged buildings and the drug trafficking. Me, I had clients who arrived here shaking, who were completely traumatized because yeah, they were mugged, their necklaces taken, telephones had been snatched from their hands because they were on the phone. Some were even slapped in their face. There were so many things you couldn't even imagine, and all that today is gone.
There are one or two establishments that are still poorly attended, poorly managed. Fado was approached by the town hall to rethink the refurbishment of some of the streets.
I myself had asked for plans at the time because they had brought me plans of Mira Street. It's now the new configuration of Rue Mira, Rue Cavé, Rue Havre, and so on. We need to change the configuration of some buildings, destroy and rebuild. And then it's not just about building. It's really redesigning with new projects, bringing in creators, experience, not only people who live in the neighborhood or who work in the neighborhood, but other skills that can contribute to the neighborhood. And now it's done. Look at how convenient it is. Not only on the psychological aspect, as it gave more assurance and security to the inhabitants and the people who work, and also for those who come to visit the neighborhood.
Mira Street has changed its reputation with the arrival of high-end boutiques. The Pearl Vagabond brand has dressed international star Beyoncé twice. The city of Paris has played a major role in securing the district. In addition to the fight against drug trafficking, the city has participated in the redevelopment of nearly 1,600 homes since 2014.
If we go back to the late 90s or at the beginning of the 2000s, we must remember that at that time there was a security issue, insecurity. There was also a threat of obsolete buildings. Basically, what we did in La Goutte district is actually what saved us from the tragedies in Marseille, and therefore clearly the balance sheet is extremely positive. There are still some tough points, and it's a bet that is still not resolved. It's about diversity, mixing different ethnic populations. I think this is what our nation reflects. It's easier, if I may say, to manage the ghettos of the rich on one side and the ghettos of the poor on the other. Here we try to mix everyone. What we want to do in the 18th is to mix everyone, and I think that La Goutte is the reality of contemporary France, a real melting pot of social origin, cultural origin, ethnic origin too. On the one hand, a real desire of the inhabitants to live together. And basically, I think it's very much like what France is today.
To restore the image of the district and promote diversity, the city has also encouraged the development of cultural spaces. Built on the site of a vacant lot, the 360 Paris Music Factory is both a restaurant and a concert hall.
From the moment when we create a beautiful place that is not dedicated to merely a category of inhabitants, a category of population, but open to everyone, people embrace them. Today, this crossroad is clean in comparison with other crossroads in the neighborhood. And even the plants that you see in front, I have the impression that the inhabitants take care of them. I have seen a few times when a passerby sees that there's a cigarette packet that has fallen next to the plants, he puts it in the trash. People are more respectful of their neighborhood, so they take care of it.
The transformation has made the inhabitants of the district proud, like Saïd.
When I lived here, it was dangerous. Here, it was called the Chicago district. I left for 4 years in the south of France, then I came back. There has been a change. The young people are more settled. We go out without fear now, and that's it. It's nice that people come. Tourists come to this neighborhood, and so we're happy for everyone simply.
Saïd Asadi is also delighted that culture is made accessible in working-class neighborhoods.
When you look at our cultural center, all those bay windows, which as soon as the weather is nice, they open up to the neighborhood, have played a very important role. And during this COVID pandemic, where people weren't getting out of their neighborhood and when they were passing by the 360, they saw musicians playing and that they could come for a drink or coffee and listen to music.
Et qu'ils pouvaient rentrer dans le lieu juste pour prendre un verre ou prendre un café et écouter la musique.
It caused a kind of incredible mix.
Vraiment mixité incroyable. Voilà, donc.
So that's the conclusion.
Il faut faire des beaux lieux.
That's it. We have to make beautiful cultural places, but open to the neighborhood, because often we tend to build cultural places with doors closed.
Tout est fermé.
People, especially in working-class neighborhoods, say to themselves, it's not for me.
What about the future of journalism in Africa? From groups of investigative journalists to security risks and war, Sadibou Marong gives us his analysis in the second part of this interview. Let's listen to him. We have seen the emergence of investigative journalists and African centers for investigative journalism, such as Africa Uncensored in Kenya or Sonozo in West Africa. Is it not finally in the interest of African journalists to work together?
What is interesting from our point of view, and even from studying the situation, is the emergence of associations or groups of journalists specializing in long-term investigations. They often lead to very good results. It helps to push the borders beyond English-speaking Africa, like Africa Uncensored in Kenya. There is also one in Ghana. There are many investigative journalists. In Nigeria too, you see them everywhere. We also see them in West Africa, with Sonozo in Ouagadougou. And more than the solidarity between journalists, there is also the sharing of experience and information. The ability to network, for example.
Le partage de la capitalisation d'expérience et le partage un peu d'informations, la possibilité de travailler.
They can work on important subjects that require travel to certain countries. And finally, the sum of all these investigations gives extremely important results.
Dans certains pays, et finalement, la somme de toutes ces investigations-là donne des résultats extrêmement importants. And
we should encourage them to work in an organized network, with the means to reveal what the governments or powerful interests are trying to hide.
The African media landscape, as well as African journalists, have changed a lot in recent years. How do you analyze this evolution?
As to the evolution of the media, it is indeed a very interesting shift. We see today there are, for example, from one country to another, newspapers appearing daily. So it is thriving. Countries that used to have only one television channel now have 3 or 4. This is important for diversity. Other countries that were not exploring digital have news sites that provide helpful information. about extremely sensitive topics of public interest.
Qui diffuse, en fait, qui projette une information utile d'intérêt public extrêmement important. Maintenant, la formation.
Now there is training. For a long time, especially in French-speaking Africa, journalism schools were part of universities.
Disons, hiérarchiquement attachés aux universités. On a vu aussi qu'il y a eu aussi l'émergence des écoles.
We have also seen the emergence of journalism schools that belong to private groups.
Et également, on a vu aussi que des écoles de journalisme.
And also the emergence of journalism schools with an outstanding curriculum that are owned by journalists who want to invest in this area.
Intéressant. Mais la formation pour nous, elle est importante.
But for us, training is important. It must be continuous and allow journalists in the field to master the fundamentals of their profession.
Aux journalistes qui arrivent sur le marché, au moins de pouvoir maîtriser les fondamentaux de leur métier, c'est extrêmement important.
It is highly important journalists can multitask simultaneously throughout the editorial chain. These are achievements that must be preserved.
C'est quand même des acquis qu'il faut préserver.
A key issue is the coverage of war and conflicts. We saw this in Ethiopia during the Tigray War. It is easy today for some to impose an information blackout by attacking journalists directly. Is this a phenomenon that is accelerating in Africa?
Il y a eu donc cette vague d'arrestations arbitraires.
There was a wave of arbitrary arrests, the stifling of civic space and persecution of independent newspapers that wanted to freely cover this war.
Indépendants qui voulaient couvrir de manière indépendante un peu sur la guerre. C'est un peu des jeux pour contrôler le narratif.
It's about who controls the narrative. But you see it in other contexts as well. The media must give voice to all parties in the most independent and honest way possible, and the consequences can be complex.
Généralement, sont des conséquences difficiles, c'est soit des arrestations, soit des lynchages sur les réseaux sociaux.
It's either arrests, interference in social networks, or strategies to block the accreditation process, to stifle international media. These are issues that exist, unfortunately, in the African context.
Finally, what kind of journalism is possible in areas where jihadism is spreading, with the risk of hostage-taking, especially if the journalist can be exchanged for a ransom?
Oui, on voit par exemple dans certaines situations.
Yes, for example, in certain situations, whether it's in Somalia, in East Africa, or in West Africa, in countries plagued by violence like Mali, Niger, and Burkina.
Violence, un peu comme soit le Mali, le Niger, le Burkina. On voit souvent.
We often see journalists are stuck between the hammer of armed terrorist groups and the anvil of the defense and security forces. These are difficult situations. But in this context, we advocate that information must remain pluralist.
L'information doit rester plurielle. On a documenté que le cas de Olivier.
We haven't only documented the case of Olivier Dubois. There is also the case of an African journalist from Mali, Moussa Mbana Diko, who worked in a community radio station and broadcast his reports. One evening, people picked him up and he has not been seen since.
And that's it. Initiative Africa is over for today. You can find the interview of Sadibou Marong as well as our shows on our website africaonair.com. And of course, feel free to follow us on all our social media channels by liking, sharing and commenting with the hashtag Initiative Africa. And don't forget, next week, same time, same channel, I'll see you again for a new edition of Business Africa. Have a great week and goodbye.